much for coming, and we are going to get started by having each of our alumni representatives introduce themselves. I've got some questions, and then if you all have questions you'd like to ask, feel free to post them in the chat, or if you feel empowered, please feel free to ask them when I go to the Q&A portion towards the end. But just to start off, thank you so much for coming, and we're super excited to have you all here and the alums here. So Hannah, I'll start with you. Just introduce yourself really quickly with your name, your major, what you're currently doing.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Crockett. I graduated UVA in 2016. My degrees were in linguistics and Middle Eastern languages and literatures. And I'm currently working with Commodics International on a global health supply chain project as a program manager.
Awesome. And I'll go next to Maggie.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I am, so I graduated from UVA in 2007 with a degree in anthropology. And I'm currently working for UVA. I work in health system development. So fundraising specifically for the health system, including the Children's Hospital, UVA Brain, and the Cancer Center.
Daisy.
Okay, so I'm Daisy Rojas, and I have a couple degrees. The first one, Anthropology, Latin American Studies in 2009, and Masters of Education, Higher Education Administration, 2014. And I also have a couple of hats that I wear. I'm Director of Development at United Way, so definitely understand the development piece. Also started a 501c3 Cultural Exchange Institute, which is a study abroad program. I'm an executive director of that. And I'm vice president of a contracting company called the Rojas Stevens Company, which operates in 3 states. So.
Thank you so much. Great experience and great backgrounds to share. So the first question that I have for you all is, what was your first professional role upon graduation? And what would you say were the most important factors in landing that first role when you left UVA?
I can go ahead and get us started. Yeah, right when I graduated UVA, I went and joined the Peace Corps. I was a public health educator in West Africa for 2 years. And I don't know if it would be considered my first professional role. I'm more so consider what I'm currently doing and what I did right before this at my current company as kind of my first real professional job. And I got this job through my Peace Corps service. And I got Peace Corps through having a linguistics background. They were really interested in my language skills, my ability to pick up languages pretty quickly. And so that's kind of how I got my foot in the door there.
And I can chime in. So my first professional role after graduating from UVA was sort of a general help out with everything kind of role at a small nonprofit here in Charlottesville with an education focus. I got that position because I had volunteered there when I was a student. I had volunteered there, eventually started working on weekends, my 4th year at UVA, and then worked there full time. And during that time, I saw that there was a need to help fundraise for that organization. So I kind of just said, all right, teach me. And that's really how I started my career in development work.
So my first role after my first degree also came from volunteer experience. I volunteered with the Center for American English Language and Culture at UVA. And that volunteer work, I worked with graduate students who were foreign-born English as a second language. My degree in both anthropology and Latin American studies, and then some of my research that I did as an undergraduate, was remembered by some of the tutoring people that I worked with through CAOC. And I was invited to be a researcher for the Darden School studying Latino financial experience in Virginia. And I didn't want to work as an hourly employee. I bargained to get a consultant role instead. So I didn't actually necessarily have an employment situation, but it was freelance. And I did that work for about 9 months. It ended up being published internationally. So it sort of launched me as an anthropologist in a professional capacity. And so that was really sort of what I started out doing, but I didn't get to fundraising for a little while. And I went back to school because I was so passionate about the social experiences that I kept running into as a researcher. And I didn't want to just study it. I wanted to do something about it. So there wasn't really a nonprofit degree at that point. There is now. You can do some different things to learn about fundraising. But at that time, the closest thing I could get was higher education administration with a focus in finance. And so it was also really great just for networking opportunities. And I ended up working in central development at UVA too, while I was getting my master's. And so that's where I kind of made the switch over to fundraising and nonprofit work.
Awesome. And such different experiences too with sort of how it happened, but it sounds like leveraging your own strengths and from your major, and then also just connections from volunteer work really helped to kind of launch you all and push you forward, which is awesome. Great things for students to be thinking about. So in terms of tools, it sounds like some of it came from connections. Maybe what are some of the tools or resources that you use in your job search, be it from your first role, or maybe even roles beyond that? What did you use to kind of help find opportunities?
Yeah, I would say, so kind of going back to what my actual first professional role was, I started as a project associate at Chemonics, which means that basically I did project management for one of the projects that Chemonics handles, specifically the USAID Global Fund, USAID Global Health Supply Chain Project, which is the largest USAID contract to supply medical supplies and commodities to countries around the world. And I got that job after a few months of kind of job hunting on LinkedIn, working within my network and other Peace Corps volunteers, mostly returned Peace Corps volunteers, to learn about Chemonics. And they gave me a lot of insight about the job and how to apply. Other tools that I used, let's see, while in undergrad, for Peace Corps, I used a lot of career counseling services. I actually talked a lot with the Peace Corps recruiter, which was great. And then just set up job alerts throughout both of my initial job searches before Peace Corps and then also before joining Chemonics, just to kind of stay up to date on what was available.
Yeah, in terms of job searching aids, I think I got my first couple jobs on Craigslist. Like, honestly, it's always worth looking at Craigslist. Since then, it's been more using Indeed has been probably my like primary job search website. If you're in nonprofit work, Idealist is a really great resource. And then I would say too, you know, just keeping in touch with people who have been mentors, coworkers. You know, I really have gotten probably all of my best leads from people that I know. And it's not necessarily that they were at a company and they were going to hire me there, but more so they heard, hey, this is a great place to work. You should keep an eye on their job listings. Or, you know, this opportunity, I heard that they're adding a new position over at, you know, that organization. And, you know, some of those people have been, like I said, coworkers, former bosses, professors, and then just friends, you know, just people that you are sort of in the same professional circles with. I think that has, you know, really given me all of my best leads.
Yeah, I'll follow that. Oh, sorry, someone else talking. Oh, it's feedback, sorry. Okay, so I was gonna say definitely for me, the Career Counseling Center helped me put together a really good CV and resume. I thought that was really useful because while I thought I had it all on the page, it didn't necessarily look the way it needed to look for different employers. My experience has definitely fallen in the same line of like relying on your networks, keeping in touch with your friends and mentors. Those relationships should not fall to the wayside just because you're no longer in school together. And truly, that's exactly how I got my position, every one of them. I'm a little unique in that I already had 3 children when I went to school. I'm well established in Charlottesville, have no intention of, you know, moving away, couldn't do that really. So I had to get a job in Charlottesville, and it was challenging because, you know, I come from this community. So a lot of times you kind of have to defend yourself of like, well, I am qualified, you know, just because, you know, I'm not from somewhere else, you know, which is sort of what Charlottesville looks for, is outside talent. But, so I had to defend that a little bit, and I had those mentors to help me with that. So they became references, and they also looked out for positions that were available. And then once you get into an interview, I think that's sort of that first getting in the door, and then how you present when you're in that interview is really important. And I did find that you have to be careful with not doing and saying everything that an employer wants to hear, because they're used to that. They know you're going to walk in there saying, you know, I'm going to do everything you asked for on this piece of paper, but being a little bit yourself and explaining why something's meaningful to you. So don't apply for a job that has no interest just because you need a job. I mean, I know it's hard to hear that sometimes because we need money, but you know, it will show if you walk into a job and do an interview and you're really not interested in what they're doing. So
Really, such great points. I put in the chat the link to the AmeriCorps and Peace Corps recruiter with her email address. She has an appointment. So if that's of interest to you, that's in the chat. So you have, and something thematically I kept hearing there that I want to make sure I point out again is that using your network, and people can't help you if they don't know what you're looking for. So make sure you're communicating that of kind of what your goals are. And you never know who may know someone who knows someone that could pass something along to you. It really, really does help in the process. So, and you heard that. I also did not ask them to say how great the Career Center was, and they did anyway, which is so great to hear. So I didn't prompt them, I promise. There was no solicitation at all from me, but we are here to help as a resource. So if you need us, that's what we're here to do. If even just a quick resume interview, I'm happy to do that. But I'm glad that it was mentioned, and I didn't even prompt it. So that was much appreciated. So obviously these are different times than typical job searching with COVID. So how would you say graduates and undergrads in general can just stay positive even when they're entering such an uncertain job market with 2021?
One of the things that comes to mind, and kind of piggybacking off of what Daisy just said, is to try and identify what you really need in a job in order to be happy. It's important to, I think, find a job that aligns with your career interests, but also if you have some minimum qualifications that a job needs to meet in order to make sure that you are financially stable and are kind of progressing on this career that you envision yourself being on. As long as the minimums are met, then I think that's kind of adjusting your mindset to think of that as adequate and sufficient will help you kind of have more realistic expectations. And that's something I had to do after Peace Corps while job hunting. It took me about 6 months. I went to Morocco, came back, was kind of looking everywhere for a job that I thought would most align with my interests and meet those other needs. And ultimately that's what I found at Chemonics, but it did take quite a bit of looking and saying no to some other jobs that came along that just weren't the best fit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I did this little exercise in terms of like, imagine the best outcome, right? What is the best life you could live? And sometimes that's not about a job at all. Like it's, what is it that will get you to that place? And maybe you need more education. Maybe it's not time to go back to work. Maybe you could cobble together a couple of part-time jobs and freelance and get yourself closer to what that ideal is. I mean, again, sort of a unique situation in that my husband and I had started a business prior to my going to school. So I actually had a job. I didn't want to do that job, which is why I went to school. And to this day, we still have discussions. Well, why don't you come back to the office? I don't want to work in construction. And knowing that about yourself is the first step, knowing what you really need to make yourself happy. And then what can you put together to get to that? It's not always, and sometimes it's not at all financial. So you can find out that there are ways that you can, make a life for yourself that doesn't have a dollar sign attached to it. Yes, you need to pay your bills within that lifestyle. But, if you're, I don't know, a wilderness rescue training person, I don't know what that pays, but maybe that's exactly what you want to be doing, and you can find a way to make that life work for you. So I think that's really important, to be a creative thinker about what can happen to make you live that best life. Oh, and one last thing, don't get caught up in titles. There are jobs out there that say executive director and I can't even chief of staff, and they're really low paying and no responsibility or authority. Well, probably lots of responsibility for things you don't want to be doing. And you think that you're increasing your, resume with these titles. But if you don't have any authority, if you don't have any ability to be a creative person in your own right, that title means nothing, not even to you, not to anyone else. You could be a coordinator, but managing large projects and, a large number of staff or volunteers. And that's going to be more powerful to the next job prospect than being the executive director of nothing and the chief of staff, where you make coffee and, put food out. So.
Yeah, this question about staying positive is really interesting to me because, so I graduated from UVA in 2007 and the economy tanked in 2008. I actually was in graduate school at the time. I have a graduate degree from University of Chicago, but what that meant was when I got out of grad school in 2010, I was scared. Like I was really scared about prospects. The economy was still really not good and I needed a job. Like I did not have another stream of income. And so one thing that I think actually really helps with staying positive is keeping in mind every job that you have, it does not have to be your dream job on paper. It might not speak to you in a way that you feel like super, super excited about, but you are going to get something valuable from every single job you ever have. And so I think keeping that in mind, knowing that when you're looking for jobs, you're not making a lifelong commitment and that you can feel good about knowing you're going to get something great out of it. I think that really helps. And it makes it feel like you're not going through, millions of websites every single day trying to find the best, most perfect looking job listing.
I put in the chat just one of our resources on self-assessments or interests and things, just in case you all wanted to take a look at it, students. But such great advice, and it's just so important. And it's so hard because the job search internship process feels so defining to your identity. I think that's what gets people really stuck. But such great points of you learn something about what you're interested in from every job you have. You get this little work experience, like, oh, like I love this part, but not this part. In my next role, that's got to be a priority. And that just helps and builds. It's a continuous process. So obviously a lot of you have changed a little bit from your first career or your first job out of college. So how would you say your career, or maybe even just your path and your goals, have changed since that first role out of college at UVA?
A lot. I think that, when I first started getting jobs in fundraising, I was doing a lot of grant writing. And the reason why I was doing that was because those were the skills that I had. I knew I was a good writer. I knew because of my degrees that I knew how to research and write things. And so I felt confident in getting jobs, related to grant writing. And the biggest change from those jobs to what I'm doing now has just been gaining expertise in the field more broadly, right? So aspects of fundraising beyond grant writing. But that was definitely the thing that got my foot in the door. And it was definitely my academic background that made me confident in knowing, okay, this is something I can do. I can have a job where I do this. And I often tell people that fundraising is, I think, a great career if you're sort of like an academic-y type person, but you might not want to go on to a career in academia. Because if you're into researching and writing and talking to people and synthesizing information into one document, you sort of get that same feeling throughout your professional career.
I can go next. Yeah, a lot has changed since my first job, and since I was considering where to apply and where to go after graduating. And even in undergrad, I took a lot of different paths. I started off as a pre-med student, took all the hard sciences, decided I was more interested in my passion, which was learning languages. I started Arabic in high school and continued that throughout UVA. And then kind of in my volunteer and internship experiences where I really got to explore some areas of kind of intersection between health and working internationally or with international populations and using languages. So I did an internship with the IRC in Charlottesville, International Rescue Committee. I did an internship at the Office of Emergency Management, their call center, and lots of volunteering at the free clinic in Charlottesville as well, and kind of all around town. So that kind of gave me a bunch of exposure to a bunch of different types of jobs that exist. Ultimately, I picked Peace Corps when I graduated because it seemed like the best combination of all my interests. And then deciding to go to Chemonics, it was not my perfect scenario at first. I was trying to get away from development work and more towards humanitarian response work, but it's a hard field to kind of break into. So instead, I focused on the positives of being able to get more public health experience, more supply chain experience, which is transferable to humanitarian response work, and project management skills, which I think are great wherever you're working. And at Chemonics, they really expose people to every part of project management, budgeting, actually managing the project itself, some more technical skills, contracting compliance, things like that. So I've gotten to be a bit more well-rounded in my skill set since joining Chemonics. And now going forward, trying to decide kind of how best to continue using my language skills, which I use every day at Chemonics with our field office team, while shifting away one step further away from development for me personally. But yeah, it's definitely been kind of step-by-step learning as I go what I'm interested in, what my abilities are, and kind of where I want to go.
So while I'm in development, I came to it from a different route. And I guess I need to go back a little farther than having been a student at UVA, because I did have a business before I came to UVA, but I started school after being homeless with two children as a single mom with nothing but a high school education. So I went to Piedmont for 6 years to get a 2-year degree before I transferred to UVA as a full-time student. And I wanted to study anthropology because I cared about human relationships and social networks. And then when I completed my 2 degrees, and, my husband and I built our business together, which, he's still at UVA. We had to go one after the other, couldn't both be there at the same time with kids, business, and work and all that stuff. But I wanted to do good in the world. And so that's applied anthropology. It's not really research anthropology anymore, but I have to pay the bills too. So where could I do that? And nonprofit came into my life, and as in development speak, I started out at UVA, but I wanted to be more in the trenches, I guess, than the development work that I was doing at UVA. So moving into building my own 501c3, because my husband is not a U.S., well, actually, he just became a U.S. citizen 2 weeks ago, woo! But not from the United States. We wanted to help his family of origin and the community that they came from, because they lived in extreme poverty. So that's why we started our nonprofit. And I started that through my graduate work, was actually my capstone project. And, I made it real. So my education has always been about what can I do right now, not somewhere way off in the future. And maybe that's because I was also an adult student. I wasn't the typical 21-year-old graduate, and so a little bit different route to get to where I am. And I love philanthropy work. I love working with my constituents to make the change that we want to see in the world right now. They're certainly laying foundation for the future as well. Bigger campaigns can do that, but I've sort of left that to be in the trenches more so with United Way. So I guess I feel like I combined, you know, a lot of things all at the same time, using my education and using the networks that I built over that period of time and using the experiences that I personally had to, you know, find a way to pay the bills at the same time.
Wow. Thank you, Daisy, for sharing your experience. That's incredible. Wonderful examples from all three of you. And I mean, I think those were just such unique and different stories. I think it's so incredible for students to hear the different types of ways people get to where they are. Thank you all for your candor on that. I have one more question for the panelists. And students, if you have questions, I encourage you either to you can private chat me if you want to, you can put it in the group chat, or feel free once we finish this last question to ask it. Completely up to you. My last question for you all is, what is one piece of advice that you have for students who are looking to gain experience and explore career options, especially knowing that they're coming from similar backgrounds as you all?
Yeah, I would say, kind of going off of that last question, I really got a lot more experience and understanding of what kinds of jobs existed and what my interests were through volunteer and internship opportunities. Volunteering especially, I think, is really important while in undergrad. It gets you into the community, gets you out of the bubble, helps you kind of have a better idea of Charlottesville as a whole and what kind of challenges exist. And it just feels nice to be able to give back. So whatever kinds of opportunities you can pursue, whether that's formally through something like the university internship program, which maybe still exists, I'm not sure, or like a co-ed service fraternity, something like that, or informally, just cold calling people, sending emails, showing up, asking if anyone could use your help for things. The more experiences you have under your belt, the better informed I think you can make, better informed decisions I think you can make when you're graduating or getting ready to graduate.
I would say one thing that I think can really help when you're, you know, sort of getting your career going is know what you're good at. Not just what your experience is, but know what you are talented at. Yes, you know, any volunteer or internship or job experience on your resume is great to see. Obviously, people know what a UVA degree means, but know what you can bring beyond what might be reflected on your resume. And then when you're interviewing for jobs, tell them. Tell people what you're good at. I knew that I was a good writer, and that's how I sort of kicked things off for myself. But I think I tried to sort of let that like speak for itself for a long time. And, you know, when you're looking for jobs, you want to be an advocate for yourself. And so you need to let people know, hey, this is something I'm really good at. So if this is something that your organization needs, I can help with that. And I think that knowing that about yourself will make you a valuable candidate in a lot of cases.
I definitely piggyback on that. Advocating for yourself, being proud of what you know how to do, even if it's a research project that you did within, you know, a graded class, you can share that with a prospective employer and they will respect that you've done this work in some way or another. You don't have to have been paid for it. Definitely my first role came from having, you know, a couple of projects that, you know, I competed in grant competitions for the Harrison Grant and a couple others in undergraduate level. But those projects really were powerful when I was able to speak about them because you put your heart and your soul into that work at the undergraduate level. That speaks to employers about, you know, where your interests lie and your ability to go beyond what's expected. If you did something great in school, share that with a prospective employer. I do want to say there will be challenges. You're already experiencing them because, you know, it's COVID. This experience going through this right now is valuable too. Whatever you're learning to do to take care of yourself, remember it because you're going to need that later in life. There are going to be challenges down the road where you need to know how do you take care of yourself. Focusing on the positive. So if you're in a work environment at some point, or if you have to take a job now because you've got to pay the bills and, you know, you might not be happy with it, find what does make you happy about it and focus on that. Even in the best jobs, there are going to be people and things that irk you, and you have to be able to just say, you know what, that's not important. What I'm doing here is really important to me and feeds my soul. And then making sure that you take the time to care for yourself. When you are interviewing, if you get to the point where they're making an offer for you, I always found it really important to make sure that I had the vacation time I needed. And you might leverage that. So if you're talking to an employer at the outset, when an offer comes in, you have that opportunity to ask for those extra things that you might need. They may say, no, this is the standard for everything, but if you don't ask, you'll never know. So I was able on a few occasions when I switched jobs to ask for 10 days of vacation where the standard was 5. And I got it because, you know, we gotten to that stage where they're making an offer. They don't want to go back to square one for the next candidate. So if they've got you that far and you're not asking for something monetary, more than likely they will give it. So do think about that when you're negotiating. You're in a power position when you've gotten to that place. You don't have to just accept whatever's given to you. If there's something you need, ask for it. Sometimes you might want to, I mean, this is a little bit in the weeds, but you might want to take a vacation before you start that new job. So if they want you to start on X date, you might say, well, I can't start that day, but I can start 2 weeks later, to give you that gap between so that you can, you know, do what you need to do to get ready. So there are lots of creative things you can do to make it work the way that you need it to.
And I just really want to like emphasize some of what Daisy was saying there. That is the number one mistake I made early in my career, was not negotiating. And again, the economy was terrible. I felt like I was just like, felt like I needed to be so grateful for anything that I got. And I think that a side effect of starting your career when the economy is not very good is you probably are going to start underpaid compared to where you would be in a better economy. And it took me in my career some time to sort of like catch up to where I should have been if I'd, say, entered the workforce 3 years earlier. And so advocating for yourself and, you know, knowing what sort of the going rate for those types of jobs is can really help in negotiation and can sort of like get you that next step up in terms of compensation. And yeah, so I just really wanted to say, like, that I think is something that is very difficult to do when you're very early in your career, but it's really important.
If I could just share a little bit of a story on that point. I did mention that the first job I was offered or asked for was to be a researcher for the Darden School. And I think it was $15 an hour. And I was like, I can't do that work for that price. I really wanted to do it. So I went back and I looked at what I could do. And I took a proposal to them and I said, I can't be an employee, but I could do this job for you for $9,000. That's what I gave them. And it'll take me this long to do it. And I'm going to write this much about it. And I'm going to interview this many people. I outlined the whole scope for them. And I believe everybody that is in this call knows how to do that because we went through anthropology together. We know how to do this. So if you can say, this is what I can do, and this is the price tag, and it matches what your needs are, that demonstration of your abilities is very valuable. And, you know, you don't know what power you have, but it turned out afterwards that yes, they were interviewing other people. They were interviewing an anthropology professor to do this research project. But guess what? She couldn't take time off from the semester to do the project. So I got the job. And it ended up being published in NPR and Pew. So yeah, it was great. So you never know what's out there if you don't fight for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love two things that came out of that a lot. One of them is the skill of advocating for yourself, which is so hard to do, but such an important skill to master and practice early. Because to Maggie's point, your first salary is where you start for your entire career. That's your starting point for moving forward. So you start off lower than you should have been forever. The increases are harder to come by and you start at a lower point. So that's a great point. And Daisy, your point, I wish I could have just kept that one part about the skills you're learning now and resilience and how they sort of impact you and you'll be useful later on. So incredibly true. Never has self-care been more important than in these times, and the ways you're coping and dealing with that, such an important skill set beyond even the scope of things here. So thank you so much, all three of you, for such wonderful advice and insight there. I do have one question that came in to me from a student. If students, you have additional questions, like I said, feel free to ask them in the chat or in the video. The question is, are any panelists by any chance first-generation college students? And if so, a little bit of nerves about networking and gaining information in that sense. Just wondering if there's any information you'd share. And if you're not, maybe any advice you'd have for students who maybe are first-generation or are just in general apprehensive about the networking and gaining information sense of things.
Yeah, I'm not a first generation college student. I will say, when I came to UVA, I came from out of state. I didn't know anyone here. And, the connections that I made were really through the community involvement, the volunteer work that I did as a student, and then really keeping in touch with, my fellow students from UVA. And, those were really the connections that I had those first few years. A couple of professors also that I kept in touch with. But that, I really find that being involved in the community to some degree, I know that right now y'all are not all out volunteering at places in Charlottesville, because that's not happening right now. But, maybe for you, it means joining a LinkedIn group where people are talking about it. Maybe it's, keeping in touch with friends from high school who are sort of studying the same kind of thing in different places. It doesn't all have to be, connections that are going to give you a job. It's really more keeping the conversations going and sort of having an idea of what's happening in different places.
Yeah. So I'm not first generation, but I definitely had a very different road to getting to UVA, and navigating UVA was difficult because I had a different experience than other students. So maybe I have a close road. I don't know if we could say that or not, but I would say, there's so many people out there and leveraging your relationships existing already, but also getting to know anybody around town or vicariously through your relationships at UVA. Talk to your professors, talk to your advisors, go to the Career Counseling Center. We all want to be the person that helps you. We do. I mean, I know I do. I'm at United Way, so I don't know if my information is there, but you're welcome to reach out to me. And so many people in the community that really want to help, especially, students who have a different route. So, definitely I would not be scared to speak up and let people know, because not only have you gone through and received an education from UVA, but you've done it in spite of some obstacles that many of us know are unusual and harder than what it might be for the average college student that comes to UVA.
Yeah, don't have a whole lot more to add than that. I think I'm actually curious though. I believe when I was an undergrad, they started a service learning division, it's like educational service learning department or something. And so I did learn about a lot of organizations looking for volunteers that way as well. But most of my the connections I made through volunteering were through my co-ed service fraternity I was in, APO. We just happened to do service projects every Saturday, for I think 3 years that I was involved in it. So I got to go out in the community all the time. But right now, with it being COVID, you might be able to find some online opportunities, or with it being COVID specifically, maybe you could get involved in helping make phone calls. And if you're a linguistics major and you have language skills to offer, that might actually be a great opportunity to practice those in a more real life situation. So yeah, definitely have to get a little creative, but engaging with the community as much as you can is a great way to kind of build your network.
I just put in the chat too for you all. We have First Gen Fridays where we do events that support first gen students. I put the link in Handshake. It's actually tomorrow. First Gen Friday, it's from 12 to 1:15. We're doing a Zoom session with a first gen faculty and staff member at UVA. Just a little chat, and that's happened once a month via Handshake. So put the October event in there. And if you're ever curious about them, feel free to email me anytime, and happy to help connect you with that event, because it's a great place to kind of build community and just learn more about successful first generation college students. So great question that came in. Thank you for it, and great responses too. That was awesome. Students, while you're thinking about questions, I realized I didn't introduce myself, which is really silly of me. My name is Drew Savage, and I work in the Career Center, and I support students who are exploring their career and major options. So my job is to help you figure out all these things that I just discussed. That's my job, to help support you to do that. You can come to me for resume support. You can come to me for internship support, wherever you are in the process. I'm here to help you through it as a counselor. So please feel free. I'll be sending out an email to all of you after this event, just kind of with some links and just some helpful resources and tips. But please utilize us. That's what we're here to do, is to kind of help get you through this very difficult time. And I know that searching for a job and internship is not easy and sometimes not very fun to do. I get it, but we're here to help make it as easy as possible and just share resources. There's an abundance of resources at UVA to utilize. A lot of it's about knowing which ones are most relevant, easy to connect with for you. I'm happy to help figure it out for each of you individually, if that's helpful. I was trying to put throughout chats in here that had events or just like links. So I put in there Pathway U, which is like a self-assessment that kind of looks at your interests and values and how it leads to career. I put Glassdoor. That's a great resource for learning about salaries as you're thinking about negotiation. Our website also has some great information on negotiation too. So that's a really difficult thing to think about, how to do that. And we actually do drop-in advising and appointments on negotiation. If you have a job and you're like, I need help figuring out how I'm gonna negotiate, we can help you figure that out. Happy to help you advocate for yourself. So a question that just came in, I think is a really, really good one. Could you share a little bit about how you explain your anthropology major to employers? And what was that like? And how well is anthropology understood, would you say, in your industry? I love this question.
Yeah, really good question. Pretty much every time I've ever interviewed for a job where I had my degree on my resume, people are like, oh, why'd you do that? So I would say expect that. People will be interested. And typically what I say is, you know, I went into college thinking I would be, I don't know, maybe like an English major. And when I started taking anthropology classes, I was just like hooked right away. And the way that I like to describe it to people is that I think that anthropology degrees teach you how to think. They teach you how to think in a way beyond your own experience. They teach you to be empathetic and to be able to integrate a lot of different types of ideas. These are skills, right? These are life skills, learning how to think in these ways. And so I often will say something like that. I will also say that anthropology knowledge comes in handy in a lot of interesting ways. One of my previous jobs, I was doing fundraising work for a historical site here in Virginia, and we had an active archaeology site. So when it came time to write grants for our archaeological team, guess what? I already knew a lot of that stuff. And it was, you know, it not only was fun for me to be able to like integrate some of my academic background, but it meant the product was better in the end because of what I knew about that topic. So I would say, you know, look for places where your knowledge gives you like an additional leg up, and actively seek out ways that you can use your knowledge in your career, even if it's not really obvious at the beginning.
I can maybe speak to linguistics a little bit. I know you'd asked about anthropology, but yeah, it was pretty difficult for me to identify jobs that were kind of perfect for linguistics majors right off the bat. I had some French and Spanish skills in high school, pretty rusty, studied Arabic all throughout college, so I was really trying to focus on jobs where I could use Arabic as either a translator, interpreter, and then after interning with the IRC, specifically with refugee and migrant groups, and then Peace Corps kind of came along as an opportunity to be able to learn a totally new language, Pular, also build up my French skills that were rusty, and kind of that ended up actually being a huge part of the work that I did, is having to be able to communicate well. So I think maybe that is the best piece of advice I can give. Yeah, my linguistics background and my language skills made me a better communicator. And in Peace Corps, yeah, I think 2 out of our 3 goals are about cultural understanding, both on the part of the Americans coming to whatever country they're in, and then also on the part of the community that you're in. It's kind of sharing cultural ideas and understanding. So you can't do that unless you can communicate well. So yeah, I don't know if hopefully that's helpful, kind of trying to throw all this together here, but communication skills that I developed as a linguistics major really came in handy later on. And in some cases, like not life or death, but we're kind of down the wire. In Guinea, on kind of back dirt roads, trying to figure out where I was going, things like that, had to be able to communicate effectively.
So I think that's accurate. Communication and cultural understanding are the 2 big things that really you can apply to pretty much anything that you might be interested in doing, or jobs that you're applying for. I think there's something unique about anthropology that allows us to look at macro and micro at the same time, that we can toggle back and forth, which is not something that everyone can do. But we're trained to look at things in different frames. So if you have that skill and you can demonstrate that, it's very valuable to an employer. It means that you can see the big picture, and yet you also know what the daily tasks are to get there. So that is a really valuable skill that is unique to us. I mean, maybe there's some other degrees out there, maybe engineering, for example, but to be on the same level in a human way is really special. And we can offer so much in so many different roles by, playing up those skill sets, I think.
I love that. And I think something that was said to me one time about anthropology is the importance of like knowing and understanding cultures and how they interact and work together. I mean, every workplace is a subculture. So you interact with people, you ask the question all the time, what's the culture like at this organization? So that's another way that anthropology is so valuable in knowing how people interact and work and cultures impact work. It's just an incredible analytical skill that I think potentially goes underutilized. So these are good examples students are thinking about how to represent yourself and talk about your skill sets in an interview or in a conversation, or when you're feeling like, man, like what skills do I have? Oh my gosh, you have so many important skills that you can market. It's just a matter of knowing what they are and communicating those effectively. That's what's really important to figure out. And I will plug again, that's what we're here to help you with too. If we can help with that, please let us know. I'm happy to help you see the wonderful strengths that you all indefinitely have to share with whatever you decide to do professionally. I don't have any more questions in here, but students, last call. Any questions from our 3 wonderful alumni panelists that you have? I'll give you like another 30 seconds and I'll babble until that happens. While I babble, thank you so much, alums, for coming. This was wonderful and so helpful for our students to see and hear. So I really appreciate your time volunteering an hour. And students, here's a great example of alums who have given an hour of their time just to talk to you in a webinar. So please utilize that as a frame of reference to reach out to alums and ask some questions about what they're doing. And I have a question from a student, so please go ahead, Savannah, and go for it.
Hi. So super honesty, I am leaning towards Peace Corps right now. It's kind of what I'm looking at and considering, but it's been really exciting hearing from all three of you guys and really encouraging. And I'd love to know a little bit about something like that you guys are currently engaged in that you wish more people would ask about, that you're really excited about, and that you wish you could share more and now have the opportunity to.
I mean, I think, you know, after having, it's been a little while since I got my degree and in anthropology, and yet those studies that I got to do as an undergraduate are really some of the most special times that I've had in my life, because I got to direct those. It was self-directed. You know, you choose your projects. You might have guidance and you know, maybe a set of requirements from a professor or something, but really take advantage of that opportunity, because later you don't always get that privilege of being able to choose what you want to study. You're told, we need to know XYZ, can you do it, you know? So take advantage of the time that you're there. You might be hustling to get to the next job, and you know, of course you want to get to that next stage, but take a moment while you're there, while you're a student, to enjoy that freedom. So I don't know if that's a, you know, real positive, but you know, take what you can get from the experience that you're in right now.
I think, so part of your question, it sounds like, was what kind of are we most excited about or interested in our careers, or kind of what when we were undergrad. I can speak maybe to Peace Corps a little bit and what I'm currently doing, if that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So definitely to piggyback off of what Daisy said, in some ways I did really take advantage of my undergrad and Peace Corps, but in other ways I wish that I really fully maxed out, especially in Peace Corps. There were just so many different opportunities to go in so many different directions. You were really responsible for creating your own projects and seeing them through all the way through to the end of implementation. So yeah, I think, and that's just a huge world of possibility. If you go to a community, you have no idea what the community needs are going to be. It's your job to kind of identify some, work with community members to figure out what they want you to do, and then collaborate to see that it gets done. And along the way, you know, adjusting to a totally different way of life. I had no internet and water for 2 years. The diet was totally different. I had to learn 2 new languages essentially. So like lots and lots of kind of new and exciting possibilities every day. And there are definitely times when like the isolation of being kind of the only American for miles was difficult. And in some ways right now with COVID, I feel like Peace Corps has kind of trained me for a bit of social isolation in some ways. But it just kind of makes you stronger. So yeah, I would say taking advantage of all opportunities as they come up and really just not limiting yourself is kind of the advice I would give, especially if you're looking at something like Peace Corps. But even now in my current role, I do the same thing. As opportunities come up, I pursue them if I'm interested in them. Still try to find ways to max out every day, whether it's taking on additional assignments or kind of trying to think innovatively and creatively about something. So hopefully that's helpful.
I can just mention something that has been coming up for my work recently that has really made me think back on my academic background, and that is actually the question of, you know, in fundraising, everybody knows about raising the dollars, but there sort of is this other side of fundraising, which is making sure that all that money can get spent. This doesn't like seem like it would be a problem, but it actually is. And so something with UVA Health right now is we've had a lot of very wonderful and generous donations to support UVA's COVID testing in the community. But that we need to figure out the best way to sort of deploy those resources. And this is not a question that a an epidemiologist is going to answer. This is not a question that, you know, the finance people at the hospital are going to be able to answer. This is a question of, you know, sociology and culture, and this is about knowing your community. And I've been able to sort of play a bigger role in those conversations because I sort of have that sense of where these conversations are coming from. And so, you know, again, your background and your interests will sort of crop up throughout your career in ways that you were not expecting.
Thank you, guys.
That was a great question, Savannah. So I think that's going to be all we have time for today. Students, I will send a follow-up message that has the links to each of their LinkedIn profiles. If you want to connect with them on LinkedIn, so you have access to that contact info. But again, thank you so much, students. Thank you so much, alums, for coming. And I hope that you all remain healthy and safe in this very strange time, and that we're going to get through it very soon. So thank you so much for coming. It was great to have you all here. And students, please join me in thanking all my panelists for joining us today for the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.